Well, I understand you had interesting substitutes helping you out.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
How was the trip?
Oh, it was long. It was a long drive.
But such a good time for you, Sunday.
Yes, we had we had a pretty good time, and he slept most of the way back. I had to do most of the driving, but anyway, so I was listening to some lectures on the other side of history, and it was most of history, as you read in the books and stuff, are about the kings and emperors and the wars and all that kind of stuff, and this lecture is dealing with the common folks and the slaves and the soldiers and the women and the children, and what their life is like in the midst of these various events and stages. And it was very interesting, and I haven't quite finished it. It's like 48 30-minute lectures, so on a long drive you can cover a lot of a lot of territory. But instead of taking I-40, it has so much truck traffic, it's just not an enjoyable drive. Took 60 up through Springfield and then down to Nashville, and then 40 all the way over to Asheville, and then over to Durham. So anyway, that was really a nice drive. It's much more pretty scenery and not near as crowded and congested on 60. So, and just about the same amount of time. So, and beautiful rest areas. They keep them up really nice. There's, yes, so much different than Oklahoma. And the other thing is really these other states, the farms and the farmhouses and the farmyards, they're clean, they're mowed, they're painted. You drive through Oklahoma, it's trashy, it's run down. They don't even mow a little spot on their yard. It's discouraging. So anyway, where to begin?
By the way, the young man, Pasco?
Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, he's really impressive.
Yeah, well, good.
Boy.
Yeah, well, he's full of a lot of energy and he does a lot of has done a lot of acting in our Baba performances, so he's got a lot of self-confidence and yeah. I noticed he got done a little early. I went online and I listened to Susanna's because I wanted to see where she was. Ben told me he did a comparison with Abraham or something, so I knew he wasn't going to be going over something where we were right now in our journey. But anyway, yeah, that was good. I'm glad you were here to support him and enjoy it. And anyway, what I was planning to do, and it kind of goes along a little more with what Susanna was teaching you, was to get back into Rosenblatt's book, Wrestling with Angels, what the first family of Genesis teaches us about our spiritual identity, sexuality, and personal relationships. Because she has a lot of good insights, but particularly in this part of the story, where there's so much family dynamics going on between the brothers and Rebecca and Isaac and so forth. But anyway, she raises psychological possibilities of this story. And of course, you need to point out, when we have biblical analysis like she does, this is called eisegesis. Now, most of us are used to exegesis, but eisegesis is, well, I think it's ISOGESIS. I didn't look it up. Why you know why I don't put a board here and write things down? No. It's because I know what the word is and I know how to pronounce it. I don't know how to spell it, and I don't want to show my ignorance because a lot of times, I'm doing an ad lib, and then I want to, oh my gosh, I have no clue how to spell that. And so, well, I know. But anyway. Eisegesis is the other way of going about it. As we're used to exegesis, is drawing the meaning out of the text. So the exo, the X, out, drawing the meaning out of the text. And we use historic analysis, we use textual criticism, we use style and form criticism. I mean, is it a letter? Is it a parable? Is it history? And then literary criticism and comparative religions. We use all of those disciplines to try to draw out of the text what is its meaning. And then, the meaning of the original author, the meaning that the people at that time would have understood. But exegesis is the other way. It's reading into the text some meaning or idea that we have and want to bring to it. Now, if we're going to do that, and it is legitimate to do some eisegesis, but it's only after we've done the exegesis and done it thoroughly. And then secondly, we need to be very self-aware that that's what we're doing. Now, exegesis is much more objective, pretty much just the facts, scientific method, and so forth. But it is more personal and subjective and intentional when we're doing the eisegesis, and that's reading something into it. Now, this is what Naomi Rosenblatt is doing. She is reading the psychological ideas into the story. Those weren't a part of the original writers. It wasn't really much a part of the legends and the stories that came. I know that Susanna gave you one of the theories of how these stories came about, that there were several tribes that had come together and formed an alliance, and a part of the way of unifying them as one people was to take all of their stories, weave them together, and to make it like one family. And so a lot of that is possible and maybe probable, but even if that's not, and she said, she said she was kind of halfway between one and another, but whether it was that way or not, the stories really are doing what she was saying, and that was to try to give the people at this point in time a sense of who we are, where we came from, why we are here in this situation, and that it is a part of God's plan. God is behind all of this, and we're at this point in history because of these events, and that God has a plan moving forward for us. And a big part of that plan, and this is what she ended her lesson with you, it's not individual. It is a we the people, together. Now, unless we have this shared sense of identity that we are kin, we are clan, we are one people, then we can't move into the future together. We'll be like what's happening in the Middle East now, is just all this infighting and killing one another, and we're not one people, we're enemies and we hate one another. Well, the story tried to get past a lot of those old wars and battles and so forth and bring the people together. And anyway, so obviously because that's the agenda. This personal family dynamics and psychology wasn't on their mind at all. They didn't know Freud. They didn't know Carl Jung. They didn't know the great psychologists and psychiatrists. But as we read the story, we do notice what is described, and we recognize evidence of a lot of psychological issues going on in the story. Whether it was intentional or not, just to good storytelling is going to create these intrigues, and it's so very normal, so very human for these things to be happening. The parents' love of their children, their hopes for their children's future and success, their desire for grandchildren. And we all have seen sibling rivalry, and the fact that even though parents may love their children equally, it so often happens one parent connects with one of the children closer because they have shared interests, and when that happens, then they spend more time together. They get a stronger bond, and they have a better understanding of one another because they spend that time together and they talk a lot more. So anyway, what Rosenblatt suggests is this statement that she's reading that may be going on in the story, and her quote is, "Unfortunately, there is a natural temptation to use our relationship with a favorite child to compensate for emotional disappointments in our marriage." Now that was an interesting thought, and rather than try to paraphrase it, she has these ways of explaining it further. She says, "The story of Jacob and Esau is a strong warning to us of the danger to children when parents draw them into the shifting power balance of their marriage. Children need to grow and develop without feeling responsible for the emotional well-being of the adults in their lives." And I've noticed sometimes, and we see it on lots of these sitcoms and stuff where the multi-generations are there, that there's all these game playing going on. But anyway, when we rob children of their childhood, we deprive them of their chance for a graduated development and for personal autonomy. So Isaac and Rebekah's marriage begins as intensely romantic, and we are given to believe passionate. But unlike Sarah and Abraham, who remained equal partners through their lives, Rebekah and Isaac seem to drift apart, perhaps because of age difference or because his mental and physical decline. But by the time they are finally blessed with 2 sons, they seem to have lost touch with the intimacy that characterized the early years of their marriage. In other words, they've grown apart, is what she's saying. And they pair off with their respective favorites and immediately create a schism in the family. To a degree, the parents compensate for the disappointments in their marriage. Now, that's what she's really reading into it, because it doesn't describe any disappointments, but there is this chasm between them, this separation. And each child may benefit in the short run from the intense devotion of a single parent, but the new surrogate marriage between parent and child is fundamentally unequal and frustrating for the child, who needs the balance of both parents in his or her life. So, I found that an interesting observation of what might have been going on, reading the psychological dynamics. And she's, like I said, is a counselor, psychologist, and so she sees a lot of family dynamics, and from her practice then recognizes this separation, this gulf, and this choosing favorites and building a strong bond in that relationship. It doesn't, it's really not a sexual one, but it's a relational one, a companionship one, a caring and sharing time together kind of relationship. Now I forgot to grab up my Bible. Anyway, but in Genesis 25:19-26, when she is carrying the two children, they haven't been born yet, she's experienced such great discomfort, she goes in to inquire of the Lord, and then she gets this prophecy that indeed she's carrying two children, and that they are in conflict, and they will be in conflict, and that the older will serve the younger, or the younger will rule over the elder of the two. Well, she receives the prophecy, but Isaac doesn't. That's just with her. She has this information in her heart and mind that she had received that prophecy from God. Now, if we ignore that prophecy and read the story, then it appears that she is being purely selfish in this deception of choosing her favorite and ensuring that he gets the blessing, and therefore that when Isaac, who is acting like he's on his deathbed, if he is indeed going to die soon, then one of the sons will assume leadership of the clan. And for her to use her influence and control over Jacob, which she doesn't have with Esau. He's out there hunting, and then whenever he comes home, he and his dad are palling around and eating whatever he has been able to catch. She doesn't have that relationship and that influence over Esau. And then, if we look at Esau's leadership characteristics, he's just on the go all the time, easily distracted. He'll sell his birthright for a bowl of stew. Not quite the qualities to lead the clan in very difficult times with threatening neighbors all around. Then for her own safety, would look to who should lead this clan when Isaac dies, then she's saying Jacob would be the better if for only one reason: I can control him. I can direct him. I can show him how to do it. Esau, he's a loose cannon. I've got no control of him and no telling what he'll do. He'd be off hunting when a crisis arrived. He might not be back for weeks, and some enemy tribe has just come and taken us over. So we need a leader we can depend on. If, like I say, if for no other reason than I can tell him what to do and he'll listen. But anyway, it looks like self-interest. But if her self-interest is aligned with the general good of the clan, then it's not an entirely bad thing for her to try to negotiate and manipulate. But we have this understanding that she got this prophecy, that this is what God intended. And if God had conveyed it to her and there was some threat to it being fulfilled, then with that knowledge and her abilities, then maybe she felt called to do something about it. But anyway, so we understand she's hanging around and she overhears Isaac making plans to give the blessing to Esau, which means passing on the leadership of the tribe to that son. So here again, if we remember At the well, when Abraham's servant goes looking for a wife, we see Rebekah showing her inner strength and her spunk. We remember that she was willing to go with Abraham's servant, sight unseen. I will go with you, and become a wife to Isaac. We remember her stepping forward and welcoming and serving the servant of Abraham at the well, watering his animals. Her strength and her assertiveness, her self-confidence. We remember that in contrast with Isaac, who seems to be rather passive most of the time. But she is definitely a take-charge personality. She's definitely a take-charge personality. Now, I worked this up yesterday, and then when I was reading over it this morning, reviewing, a thought came to mind from what Susanna had said about how important the wells are. And that's where people, gather, and that's where they meet to find mates and spouses. Well, up until that point, I had only thought from Abraham and his servant's point of view that if you're going to find a wife, go to the well where the girls come to gather water and take it back to their families. I hadn't thought about the other side. It's where the girls go to find a husband, right? I mean, it's a two-way street. Now you stop and think about it a second. Rebekah is the first to jump down and gather the water and go and be present with this guy who's come with all of these camels. What do camels symbolize? Wealth. Wealth. Let's see, there was some silly game show that just happened to be flying by, and it asked, now we hear that a lot of times younger women are really interested in find wealth and power attractive. And the game show was asking, what do 80-year-old women find attractive in a man? I guess they're single or widowed. And they offered good health, a good memory, a good dancer, or a good bank account. You ladies, what is the most important thing in this survey?
It'd be good health, but it probably wasn't.
I thought good memory. That meant, he's not going to leave you mentally. He's going to be active and engaged. It was like 80% checked bank account. Or no, it's 63%. Anyway, it was a majority. So, anyway, here's Rebekah, a young woman. Maybe, just maybe, she wants out of there. She is bored to tears. Or she's feeling oppressed. And she's looking for an opportunity to get away. So she's the first one down there to the well and got the jug of water. And here, let me water your camels too. She doesn't want any other girls to slip in there and to get this guy's attention. Maybe. Who knows? But anyway, it gave me, after listening to Susanna's lesson with you all, I thought, oh my gosh, there is the other side. The young women are looking for spouses. It isn't just old men trying to find a wife for their master's son, but this is really an important situation. So, anyway, a take-charge personality here is displayed. So Rosenblatt points out that Rebekah is exercising her freedom of choice when she concocts this plan of deception to get Jacob to receive the blessing. Now, there might have been another approach. This one thing the biblical writers do not do is go deep into the character's thoughts and feelings. We only have either dialogue or actions. And so we don't know what other plans she might have thought of, but we do know she is not coerced by any outside force making her come up with this deception. It comes from her. It's her idea. And it's her free choice to exercise this plan and to enlist Jacob in the plan. Now, there may have been other ideas, and this may have been the best option that she had. I mean, she could have devised a way to cause Esau's death, so Jacob would have been the only one to receive a blessing, but she didn't do that way. Anyway, she does choose the deception, and it's risky because it can cause great harm if Jacob is caught in the act of deceiving before the blessing is received. But it does cause great harm anyway to Esau and his feelings, where he's devastated by the betrayal of his brother. Not just losing out on the blessing, but the betrayal of his brother. It causes great harm. And then when he gets over the hurt and wailing, he becomes so angry that he threatens to kill his brother. So that's the risk that Rebekah took, and the cost of that decision. Now, in psychological terms, this story taps into so many family situations where inheritance is an issue. Who is the right child to assume the responsibilities when the parents aging has them lose the ability to take care of themselves, their physical well-being, and their financial concerns? It's a tough choice sometimes. And sometimes it causes confusion and hurt feelings when the parents decide that they trust one child over another child. To have either the power of attorney for health concerns or power of attorney for the financial concerns. You know, why did you choose this one? Why didn't you choose me? And then the naming of the executor of the estate is another decision that can cause great distress and hurt feelings. That's why some people go to the bank and they get a trust officer. You handle it. I don't want my children to get in a big fight. You know, they'll spend the fees to see that happens just so that there will be peace in their family, because they're so concerned because of the dynamics and the history. They're very worried about that. But because of the potential for upset and conflict, sometimes parents don't communicate what they've done. And then when the crisis comes, then everybody finds out. And then and then it gets really bad sometimes, and there's all kinds of confusion and upsets going on. Or they only tell the naming of the power of attorney or executor to the one that they're giving it to, but don't tell the others, and then that one assumes that, well, the parents told everybody else, but then finds out later, no, they didn't, and so then there's confusion and upset. But anyway, and it's been a while since I've had to deal seriously with any family where there's huge conflicts after a death, but occasionally in the past it was often not the blood kin, the children themselves, but the in-laws, their spouses, who were trying to stir things up, thinking that things were not being fairly distributed, and they needed to get in there and fight for what was their right, and so forth, and that was a problem. And then there's another one that I suspect had happened that kind of is connected with this story. Sometimes it seems like there was a favorite child, and it was, the star child, the favorite child, the good child versus the bad child, and anyway, in these family dynamics, and the child who was not the favorite seemed to have the attitude, well, you got all the love, and to make up for it, I should get all of the stuff. You got the love, I should get the money. So, anyway, I wasn't included in all the family discussions, but it just seemed like that might have been part of what was going on. And maybe that's part of Jacob's motivation to go along with Rebekah in this story. And so, anyway, but that's, again, eisegesis. That's reading into it, but it doesn't actually come from the text, but there's evidence that there is some real strong family dynamics going on. In our world, the question of family business, who inherits chairman of the board and president of the family corporation or business, the eldest son, second son, a daughter, those kind of things happen, and sometimes an outside person is brought in because realize none of the kids, one, they might not be interested in the business. They've all felt called to go do something else. My dad was a general contractor, and he was working with my dad, came back from World War II and kind of saved the company, and then my grandfather was a mess, and he left the company, and then he came back and messed everything up, and so my dad started another company, a smaller one, to transition in case my grandfather ruined that company, and he called it Tankersley and Sons. Well, he had 3 sons. I went into the ministry. My brother, younger than I, became an attorney, and my youngest brother became a computer whiz. But nobody was going into construction business. So, and then, anyway, he retired early, and then, I don't know, I think I told you this. He was doing all kinds of stuff at home. He was relining the draperies. I mean, it was bizarre kind of stuff just to keep himself busy. And then my mother was a psychiatric social worker at Central State Hospital, and so there was an opening there as a clerk in the pharmacy area or something, and he got that job. Well, then he's on staff, and the head engineer of the whole Central State Hospital complex retires. Well, when you post for jobs, you post within the business. I mean, so he just applied. So, well, there's one qualification. You have to be a PE, a professional engineer. Well, he didn't have that, but he made up a resume of all the construction that he had done for his whole career. You got it. You qualify, professional engineer. You got it. You're head engineer of the Central State Hospital. And then the state decides to build a bunch of new buildings. You be the inspector. So he had been retired, doing nothing, and then all of a sudden he's got this really big job. And then he saved the state of Oklahoma $11 million, because on the last review of the contract, a decimal point had moved over. Now, this was before computer stuff. Anyway, and he caught it. And that was one of the percentages for one of the engineering firms. that seemed to have connections in politics somewhere. And anyway, oops, that moved. That isn't supposed to move. Put it back. It's $11 million difference. So anyway, so I'm proud of my dad doing that. But anyway, but who will take over the company? and my brother was as an attorney, got into the maritime administration out of George Washington University Law School, and then he went to Georgetown University and worked in the government. And then his boss went down to New Orleans, and then he went back to Washington. But my brother stayed in New Orleans, and he was working for a steamship line that the son had inherited, and he was running it in the ground. I mean, he killed the company. He was just bad business decisions. He just couldn't take care of business. So a lot of places, the son just can't manage to do the business and keep it thriving. Look at Richard Roberts and ORU. You know, he couldn't maintain the self-discipline and the drive and the energy that his dad had, and so he couldn't do it. But anyway, hard decisions regarding the future of family business and the clan's survival really kind of relates to a lot of situations today. But Rosenblatt, moving on, lifts up. I still haven't gotten my new watch band. I need to do that this week. Okay, 10:24. Yeah. Well, it's not the money. It's just finding time to go someplace where they'll put it on for you and make it work. Anyway, because my fingers don't work. Those little tiny pins, they're the hardest. Anyway, Rosenblatt lifts up the changing roles of spouses, husbands and wives in the aging process. And in our story, Isaac thinks that he's about to die. He's gone to his couch. He's on his deathbed. He's going to die. But he doesn't. He lives a lot longer. But anyway, he is retired from life. And so Rebekah takes charge of the big decisions. However, she does so on the sly. But we find in real-life families sometimes we have to be less than candid when a loved one develops dementia or Alzheimer's, and they aren't all the way there, but it's the beginning, and they're not quite able to manage things well, but yet they still have the power to make big mistakes and to do things wrong. So sometimes we have to be deceptive, and one of them is, the driving. The skills of driving. We don't want our loved one being injured or, God forbid, running over a child when we knew they weren't really up to the skill level to be driving out there in that traffic, and yet we need to do something, but it's not a logical, rational decision. So sometimes, we just can't find the keys, or the car just won't start because took the starter coil off or something. But I heard about a man whose family had done that to him, and he had enough money. He just called the car agency and had them come pick him up and take him down to the car dealer, and he just bought himself a new car and drove it home. He said, I don't know what's wrong with that one. I need a new one, so come get me. So anyway. But Rosenblatt raises another issue that's an important one. It's the blessing. And we see that the form of the blessing that went to Jacob was very positive. It was a wishing well, very hopeful. It was unconditional love, and the blessing was giving him a sense of purpose and meaning. Your life going forward will be important. It will make a difference. It will be a part of keeping our family alive and our place in the world. It was bestowing upon that child this gift of confidence and trust and hopes and good wishes. Unfortunately, in some families, children don't get that. That for whatever the reason, a parent is conveying a lack of respect, a lack of confidence, a sense of disappointment or disgust, or often disowning. I mean, just outright disowning the child for some mistakes or some character flaws that they think the child has. But that just reinforces, well, you think I'm a failure or you think I'm bad? Well, I'll show you. I'll just prove it to you and make you right, rather than getting the sense of, I'm going to be different, I'm going to prove you wrong. So, sometimes we hear the interviews of artists and actors and all that, and how their family thought that they were crazy, and go get a real job and go do something where you can earn money and make a living. Don't, follow this dream and end up losing out on life and being unhappy, and then all of a sudden, they've got a part in a sitcom, and then they've got a movie, and those are the ones they interview. I don't know if they go out and find the ones where the parents were right. It's a mistake. You don't have the talent. You're not going to be any good at this. Go find something else. But anyway, it's hard, and young people need that affirmation and that love and support. But basically, someone who believes in them. I mean, that's the basic thing. Someone who believes in them. And then giving them that blessing that no matter how many times you fail and fall on your face, I believe next time it's going to work. You just haven't found the right thing yet, but it's going to work. I believe in you. You will be a blessing. Anyway, she also mentions that it's a two-way street. The children need all kinds of love and support along the way, this unconditional love, but the other side, the children need to convey respect and so forth back to the parents. But a lot of times, parents have made mistakes. It's difficult to know year to year and situation to situation when to apply tough love, disciplinary intervention, and when to let the pain be the teacher as the child suffers the natural consequences of their mistakes and bad choices. Love does not mean overprotecting, and it doesn't mean constantly hovering like the helicopter parent. But anyway, often parents make mistakes, no matter how well-meaning. I remember a dad in Ada who tried to cheat on his child's Pinewood Derby. Now that's a Cub Scout thing where it's a little kit. You make this little race car that, rolls down a plank, and whoever, you put 4 or 5, how many of them, Wally, do you remember Pinewood Derbies? Or they're like 5 or 6?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
We didn't get into Cub Scout. Boy Scout.
Was that Boy Scout? Well, okay, it's Boy Scouts then. Anyway, I remember the kit. The boys are supposed to make the car themselves. Now the dad can advise and direct, but it's a hands-on thing. The boys are supposed to do it. Well, this one was painted so well, and it obviously was done by the dad, but it was discovered that he had tried to sneak extra weight into it to make it go down faster and win the race. Well, he didn't hide it good enough because they got caught. I mean, it's sad enough that a dad would do that. The extra sad part, he was a member of my church. Not only was he, but more so his son was mortified and deeply embarrassed and shamed by what his dad had done. But the point of this story is parents make mistakes trying to be helpful one way or another, and sometimes they make big mistakes, and it's very hurtful. But Rosenblatt says that adult children sometimes will confront their parents about their mistakes and unload a lot of anger and bitterness. And she advises that parents really need to fess up and admit that they're not perfect and have this discussion sometime before it builds up so much in the child that they get blasted sometime later in life. And usually it's at a point when they're at a declining strength. They haven't got enough strength to pop that child in the mouth for talking back. But anyway, there needs to be a good relationship, and a lot of times this bitterness and anger is built up, and then when the blast comes, then the relationship is irreparably damaged and can't be overcome before the elder dies. And then there's a lot of heartache and guilt and so forth. But whatever the circumstances are, families really need to talk these things out, because so often, another psychologist talked about a child's magical thinking. And this is when a child will interpret a situation at a child level and put onto it this magical power, like either for themselves, that if someone said, wash your hands and cover your mouth when you cough, well, they go visit a grandparent and they cough and they don't do that. The grandparent gets sick, gets pneumonia, dies. All of a sudden the child with this magical thinking thinks, I killed grandma. And they carry that weight. So this magical process in a child's the way they interpret events. Sometimes they have this magical thinking that the parent is so powerful that the parent controls everything. And so when something bad happens, they think the parent did it on purpose and made the bad thing happen. And so in the child's view, they've got a misunderstanding. So often in heart-to-heart conversations, the parent can explain what really happened, and then this grown-up child can think, oh my gosh, I had this impression, this image of what was going on, and it was completely wrong. It wasn't that way at all. And so without that discussion, folks are left with false impressions and undue blame and unresolved hurts and anguish. So, all right, we've got 4 minutes. Let's see. Anyway, so she says that with understanding, then compassion can come, and with understanding and compassion, often forgiveness and reconciliation can happen between parents and children in later life. And like I said, if the bitterness and the hurts and the angers are unresolved before the elder dies, then it's a terrible burden to carry on forever. And so it's best to try to get resolution and reconciliation and have a better understanding. And that's probably a good place to conclude and give you a chance to respond or ask a question real quick. Well, y'all think about Rebecca and whether she was just an opportunist and looking for the richest guy who had come to the well and was always a conniving and sneaky person and self-serving, or was she not? Was she just the right person? And circumstances forced her to be that way. So, anyway, well, let us pray. Well, dear God, we thank you for these stories about people in ancient times who tried to understand who they were and who you wanted them to be and how you wanted things to work out. We know that you can use folks when they're not their best and when they make mistakes, which means you can use us and direct us, even though we're not perfect and we've made mistakes, that there's always a second chance and a third chance to start anew and to find out ways that we can use those experiences and learnings from our mistakes to do good things in the future. In Christ's name, amen.